We are still 4 days away, and fingers crossed for the Citrus Bowl. Iowa, Kentucky, 6 games have been impacted during the bowl season by COVID. We hope the Hawkeyes and the Wildcats will be unaffected. We're talking Hawkeyes for the next hour with you right here at the Voice of College Football, courtesy Corey Bratta from the Hawkeye of the Storm. And we would ask that you would head on over there right here on YouTube or on your favorite audio platform and track Corey's work and content there at from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Corey, how you doing today?
I'm doing okay. I have been enjoying some bowl watching here this afternoon. I'm kind of upset that Louisville can't seem to stop a triple option offense for Air Force that they've had a month to prepare for, and they just failed on a 4th down and goal to 3 because they have no confidence in their kicker, who also missed a field goal from inside of 45 earlier in the game. So I'm sort of sour about that game because I did pick Louisville. There's still time left, but yeah, I'm excited about the game on Saturday. It's an interesting matchup. I know we've been previewing it here now for a while, but Wan'Dale Robinson, Will Levis, that vaunted Kentucky offensive line that everybody views so highly. It's a good matchup. It's a matchup of two teams that haven't necessarily been tested as much as most 9 or 10 win teams in the country have been, at least at this point in the Power 5. But I think it's going to be a close game and a good game.
We had a Georgia-Michigan live stream, and the Big Ten versus the SEC narrative crept into the live chat quite a bit. The SEC is a decided edge in overall games played between the two conferences and in bowl play. However, the SEC off to a rough start here at 0-3 this bowl season.
You said that there's a decided advantage non-conference Big Ten versus SEC this season?
Decided advantage in the series between the two conferences.
Overall?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know what the records were this non-conference season?
I did at one point because I was posting videos the first few weeks of the season when there was a lot of non-conference activity. And they both played about the same against the rest of the Power 5. They were both in that 9-6 range. Those might not be the exact numbers, but and the SEC was a little more successful in avoiding upsets outside the conference as they typically are against the group of 5 in the FCS.
Well, Mark, as you know, I'm not afraid to voice a strong opinion about sports. I'll just say this. After watching the Tigers this morning, Auburn is a disgrace. They are a disgrace because and this is, I think this must be a culture issue. I don't watch as much SEC football as you do, obviously, but every time I turn Auburn on, I see targeting penalties. I see unsportsmanlike penalties, lack of discipline. And it's been that way for years. I go back to Nick Fairley, the big defensive lineman who was one of the dirtiest fools to ever play college football. All right. And it was fitting that he teamed up with Ndamukong Suh in Detroit for a while because that was a nasty tandem. And it started with Fairley at Auburn. And I saw, 4 called targeting penalties today, at least. I didn't even have that game on the whole time. I had maybe half the game on. And I saw 4 called targeting penalties. Now, 1 or 2 of them were overturned. But good Lord, I don't know. I can't even remember maybe a couple Iowa targeting penalties all year. And I just think it's ridiculous. And I'll tell you what else is ridiculous. And you and I have had Twitter conversations about this over the past week. ESPN must be having problems getting good personalities because they cannot seem to get a good color commentator. Their play-by-play guys are okay. The guy today, the kid from Clemson, is it McLean? All right, who was a complete Auburn homer the entire game, ripping Houston. At one point, he made a comment that I thought was ridiculous. Oh, I hate the targeting rule. He didn't say he hated how it's enforced or things need to be. Oh, I hate the targeting rule, which I understand there needs to be changes with the rule with targeting. I think we both agree on that, Mark. But I saw the same kid for Auburn. Was it Monday? Was that his last name?
Smoke Monday. Yep.
Yeah. Lead with his helmet 2 times in one game. The first time the refs overturned it, but he's clearly helmet straight at his at the offensive player. Second time he gets called for it and gets tossed. But we're celebrating it like, oh, this is good for football. Like, I don't like the rule. You don't like the rule. Do we know the data on CTE and concussions, and we're trying to make the game safer? I understand there need to be changes to the rule, but you have to have a targeting penalty. because the data is overwhelming. I don't want to get on I guess I'm kind of creating a drama rant here, Mark, but I get perturbed at some of these personalities that play. Targeting is a very serious thing. There's a reason why I'm not against the call. I'm just against how it's enforced, because it's not consistent. We need consistency with officiating. However you're going to officiate games, we just need them to be consistent. And I don't think I don't think ESPN's. I've heard a lot of that, not just from McLean, but personalities on the air that don't understand rules and don't understand why they're there. And this is the kid who played. First of all, he was a guard at Clemson, so be that as it may. But I'm just saying, don't understand why the penalty is there, or maybe the importance of it.
Yes, I only saw bits and pieces of that game. I was here recording and doing live streams during much of that game. I did hear his response to the targeting call that ejected Smoke Monday, and did hear him state more than once that he didn't like the rule. And the play-by-play announcer more emphasized the positive aspect or change that the players are allowed to stay in the game on the sideline, stay in the stadium, and stay with their teammates, and try to. And had I known that there were other conversations concerning targeting prior to the that one, that I would have better understood, and it makes more sense of the approach of the play-by-play announcer in steering clear of more targeting discussion and wanting to put more of a positive slant on the implementation of the rule.
And by the way, I saw Auburn with a 10-yard punt inbounds. Did you see this?
Yes, I did.
10-yard punt. I mean, I don't know that I've ever seen anything like that at the SEC Power 5 level. I don't remember the last time, Mark.
I've seen some bad punts. I've seen some,
that was disgusting.
2 and 3 yard punts.
It's one thing to shank it off the side of your foot. No, he didn't shank it off the side of his foot.
Yeah.
It was straight ahead. It was a 10-yard punt. Now, I know it bounced backwards. I get it.
Yes, it wasn't he did not kick the ball 10 yards.
But a punt cannot bounce.
It probably hit a good 20, 22 yards downfield. That's still not a good punt.
Yeah.
But it kicked back at least 10 or 15 yards. Something in that range.
A good punter knows how to control spin on the ball to where in that situation the ball's not going to bounce back. It's going to bounce forward. So anyways, I got a laugh out of that, the 10-yard punt. But I am disappointed with ESPN's personalities that they and again, maybe it is a hiring issue. I mean, I know businesses all over the country are having problems keeping employees. Maybe do you know, Mark, do they have issues keeping good personalities at good rates? I
don't know. I know that many of the lower tier games, not talking about the personalities themselves, but the production of the games, many of the lower tier games go to freelance work. And so you'll see, and I commented the other night that there was the overhead camera, the camera that catches most of the action, not the sideline cameras that show you the replays, but the overhead camera had to be, with all the football I've watched for 45 years, had to be the worst work by an overhead cameraman that I've ever seen. Like consistently missing like 15-yard pass plays downfield. Like,
I know.
What is going on? So in addition to that, while we're ranting, I'll pick up on your rant and then we'll move on to the Hawkeyes, of course, is I heard, and I'm not going to either look up this person or name them by name just because I don't know their name, but this was during one of the low tier bowl games. And we all know that there are going to be announcers that we hear from during bowl season that we don't normally, because we're watching the games on Fox and ESPN and ABC and watching the main games, and not a whole lot. Many of us now watching ESPNU and such. However, there was a play-by-play announcer that was just flat out incapable of calling a football game. That I expected to hear on cable access. It was atrocious.
Well, that's sort of like what you have when. Well, I know you're not familiar with BTN Plus, but for all us Hawkeye fans who have subscribed to BTN Plus to watch Iowa basketball, it's. Now I give them credit. They've gotten Jess Settles, the great Jess Settles, to commentate, and it certainly helped. But I know for years, I mean, they've got, and some of it's students, so they have, I'm sure they're working for free on an internship, but yeah, the camera work. I mean, I was watching an Iowa basketball game the other day, and they have, they have the camera that's at the top. They have two different cameras up at the top of the stands, and if you know how Carver is set up, the cameras are way at the top of the arena because it's a bowl, and they've got one camera that's zoomed in on the details of the game and following the ball, and then the other camera is way back and just is a you can just see the entire crowd and the entire court, and the game is going, and they have it on the camera way back, so when you're on the TV, you feel like you're standing at the very top of Carver Hawkeye Arena. You can't tell what's going on. So, and you got to pay for this garbage, Mark. This is a subscription only thing. So, I've went off on BTN Plus in the past. And by the way, why are bots now starting to get into our live streams? This was never an issue before, and now bots are in our live streams, Mark. I've had to block them every show. I wish people could find better work. ESPN needs work. So if you're coming here to spam, I know this is probably just robots. Go apply at ESPN because they need help. Maybe you can do something productive.
Oh, yeah. I refrain so much from commenting on Twitter to stupid or inaccurate or illogical takes, whether it just be sheer incompetency or just opinion that is not in any way logical or accurate based on information. I refrain so much because I just don't want to talk poorly about certain people. Generally, if they're giving an honest effort, but
well, I understand that, but it's like criticizing many of the Iowa coaches. I mean, you're in the public eye. You're making money doing it. What's that?
Or us being criticized, which is fine.
Yeah, I don't. We won't go there. By the way, Louisville did just score, so it's a 7-point game now. 28-21, Air Force leading in the First Responder Bowl. So we'll take it at that. With that being said, we can move on to the Citrus Bowl if you want, Mark. You and I talked about, again, Wan'Dale Robinson, what he was able to do at Nebraska. He does scare me a bit. Will Levis's ability to move the ball. I'll tell you something else, though. I was impressed with Kentucky. I watched Kentucky-Louisville on Sunday. Watch that game back. And Kentucky went up and down the field. Will Levis, 4 rushing touchdowns. And the only guy I can think of that Iowa played this year that sort of reminds me of Will Levis would be Sean Clifford. And that's sort of an odd coincidence, but not really, because, of course, Levis is a Penn State kid originally. So when Sean Clifford was in that game against Iowa, Penn State pretty much dominated, whether you want to admit that or not, at least on that side of the ball. So he does worry me a bit. I don't think he's got the arm talent that a Sean Clifford has, but he's more athletic than Sean Clifford. I'll tell you that right now. He had a beautiful run where he juked a man out of his shoes, hurdled another man within a sequence of it lasted about 5 seconds. So, it does concern me a bit. I do think Iowa will win this game. I did make the pick earlier this week. I think they'll cover, obviously, because I think Kentucky's favored right now, correct? Are they? And that may move, but I think is it still 2.5? The line
last
right
I checked, I don't know what the
so
current line is.
Confident they'll cover and win. So, but again, it is an interesting storyline, and you just hope this game happens. I hate to be sitting here on December 28th, 2021, Mark, 2 years into this pandemic, saying we hope the game happens. I mean, it just sucks. I don't have any, and I have my feelings about, some of these games being canceled. I'll say something else, and I'm not going to comment on the virus. What I'll comment on is I am kind of perturbed. I've went off on Twitter about this. I am perturbed by the fact that teams like UCLA are canceling the day of or the day before. What are we doing here? The report came out that UCLA had a linebacker practicing at guard heading into today. So they were having mass issues. Don't tell me that 40 to 50 players tested positive today. We all know that's bogus. If you're having problems, I know you're after yourselves and you're after your kids, but why don't we maybe try to think of other teams and other schools and other student athletes? You're leaving these teams out to dry, and now you have a situation with the Wolfpack. They got nobody to play. But, I guess it's a positive for Iowa because Iowa's still the Holiday Bowl reigning champions. So, because there wasn't a game last year, there's not going to be a game this year. So, it's just frustrating. I wish it wasn't the case. It was nice to see Central Michigan get scheduled, and hopefully that game happens now. And who are they playing again, Mark?
Washington State in the Sun
Wazoo,
Bowl.
okay. Yeah, so that's great. I don't like Barstool Sports, never have, so I'm not upset that game's not happening. I think, Dave Portnoy is a fool, but we can talk about that a different day. But I'm sad for the student athletes don't get to play. Perfect example, Hawaii. Don't have anything against the program, but you send a group of kids out from, was it Boston? Who was scheduled to go to Hawaii? I forget all these matchups now.
That was Hawaii and Memphis.
So Memphis comes out there, and the day before, you're you're the home team in this bowl game, and you can't give these kids more than 1 day heads up that you're having issues, and then you're not going to be able to fulfill your end of the bargain and play the game. That's just ridiculous. And again, you can complain all you want about the protocol around COVID and the new variant. That's a discussion for, I guess, another show. But the point is, the fact of the matter is, if you test positive, you're not playing. That's just how it is now. And so you've got to think, some of these schools, I think you got to think of other schools involved. It's just a sad way. And boy, you just hope the college football playoff doesn't get affected. You hope that the Iowa game doesn't get affected. And I want to see the New Year's Six bowl games being affected. And by the way, talk about ridiculous. I'm gonna take a shot at your team. Okay, what is Olave and Wilson? What are they doing opting out of the Rose Bowl? I mean, what is this world coming to that the Rose Bowl means nothing anymore, Mark? I mean, you got to give me that, right? You're a Buckeye fan, but I understand you're trying to protect your health, but this is the Rose Bowl we're talking about. I don't care if it's part of the playoff or not.
Well, that's what it has come to, is that for these players,
that's just too bad.
They are looking at their NFL future versus the perceived risk. I won't even call it the risk. It's their perceived risk. And they don't hold the Rose Bowl. I think they understand. They have some knowledge of what the Rose Bowl is versus other bowl games. There's no question about it. But in terms of them having some type of attachment or appreciation to the extent that we do, they obviously don't.
Yeah. And that's just frustrating to me because, Ohio State was selected over Michigan State, and rightfully so. They were selected over Iowa, rightfully so. But there's not many Ohio State fans who are probably going to be real locked into that game. Am I right?
Well, but that could be part of your problem that we're having with this, is that it's just not affecting the players. It's affecting the perception of the game, period, is that Ohio State fans aren't even that into the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, it's just sad. And I was on a show last night and was talking about, some of the changes in college football and how it's just affected. I mean, players have always been able to opt out, but I think of 2008. Sean Green has a ridiculously good year. We all knew he was going pro. He plays in the Outback Bowl. That would never happen now. We have Tyler Goodson, who I haven't seen, Mel Kiper's projections, but I would guess he's a 6th to 7th round pick. That would be my guess right now. And that's no offense to Tyler. It's just how it is. Sean Green was a 3rd round pick, I want to say. I could be wrong on that, but there was no talk about him opting out of the Outback Bowl. And that's the Outback Bowl. It's not a New Year's Six or the BCS national title game.
I'm not going to comment on that without knowing the metrics across the board. So this is another situation in which our attention is caught up in who's opting out. So Ohio State's having 4 players opt out. How many could they have had opted out? Kenneth Walker and Kenny Pickett are, of course, the headliners at the Peach Bowl. So that's disappointing. The 2 most prominent players in a game will not play. But I would have to go through to see, okay, how many NFL draft eligible players are there, and how many of those players are somewhat secure in their draft status versus how many are opting out.
Yeah, that's fair. And, the problem too here with teams like Ohio State and then, of course, Michigan State with Kenneth Walker and certainly Pickett is you have offensive skill position players who are going to be the ones that drive ratings up. Like if Tyler Linderbaum opts out, he's the best player on the field Saturday. All right.
Yeah.
And you could make a case he's one of the best players in the Big Ten. Now, some people will laugh at that, but if we're just talking players, we're not favoring skill position players. Linderbaum's, I don't know who you'd put ahead of Linderbaum. I'll say that.
Sure.
But if he opts out, it's not going to affect ratings like if a Kenneth Walker opts out or an Olave or et cetera. So
yeah,
I understand both sides of it. It's like the portal. It's like everything now. I mean, you can't blame the kids for leaving. You can't say that the kids don't deserve to be able to go where they want. But at the same time, it has changed college football to where it makes it harder on other athletes. It makes it harder on schools. It's more frustrating as fans. It just changes college football, and it's just is what it is. It's just frustrating.
I am trying to find projections on how many Ohio State players will be taken in the NFL draft, and I'm seeing 6, 7, 8. I'm seeing somewhere in the span of 8 to 10.
And how many have they had opt out?
4.
And so more could come, right? I mean, could they opt out this late?
Well, you would hope that that they would have the respect for their teammates to make that decision known.
Well, I'm trying to figure out why Olave and Wilson opted out this week. Why'd they wait? What are we waiting for?
I don't know. Hopefully they were not taking practice time away from anyone.
Yeah, that just seems odd. And by the way, Louisville's defense is a sieve. I know I've said that before, but if Iowa fans should be interested in this game, Mark, because Kentucky's last game was against this Louisville team, and Kentucky put up the most points that anybody put up against Louisville all year in 52 points. And right now, Louisville cannot stop Air Force to save their lives. Now, they got fortunate in that third quarter, but Air Force, was, of course, is a triple option team, has been throwing the ball downfield at will against this Cardinals defense. So maybe don't read so much into the Kentucky result against Louisville in that rivalry game. It was impressive. It was on the road, but and Louisville's battling some issues in their defensive backfield. That's made a difference as well. I did see somebody in the chat, Mark, that asked who I think will start. It's not who I think will start. It's who will start. Spencer Petras is the starter. There is no debate. There's no question about this. All right. Unless Spencer has an injury, a nagging injury, he is the starter on Saturday. All right. That's just how it is. I don't like it. I don't agree with it. I'm not there every day in practice, so I can't say 100% that Alex Padilla should start, but I would prefer Alex Padilla start. But I just, there's a lot of clickbait on Twitter today about, oh, we don't know who the starter is yet. Kirk's not announcing it, and the players aren't, they're not offering their take on the situation. Petras is the starter, Mark. I mean, and maybe I'm just bitter because I'm tired of it. I like Spencer. He seems like a really nice kid. I saw he was involved in a big donation to the Children's Hospital the other day that was publicized on a Twitter account. And, I saw he gave some tickets away to a random fan on Twitter. He's a man of the people, Mark, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's the best option at quarterback. I don't believe he is right now. And I'd like to see Padilla, and maybe we will see Padilla. I kind of doubt it. If Spencer starts, I bet Spencer finishes. But again, we don't know what will happen, and injuries are always part of the game. And Spencer has dealt with some injuries this year. Have heard nothing more about transfer portal quarterbacks, so I'm not even going to really address that on today's show. We're in the same spot we were a week ago at this time. But as far as running back is concerned, no Tyler Goodson, of course. Ivory Kelly-Martin is getting, it sounds like, according to multiple media outlets who are at practice today, Ivory Kelly-Martin was sharing snaps with along with Gavin Williams. So both those guys will get snaps. I think Gavin will probably get more snaps, would be my guess. And Ivory Kelly-Martin, if he fumbles the ball, he's out. He's done. Now, you can't have, a lot of people are surprised he's on the depth chart at all. They're giving him a chance here because he's been a really good teammate. He's been a really good leader for this team, especially with some of the issues off the field last year before the season started. So I think they're trying to throw him a bone. But again, if he drops the ball, he's out. And that leaves a very thin group of running backs, Gavin and LaShawn Williams, and then Devin Hilson, kid out of Des Moines, who's not played a snap to at least that I'm aware of. So it'll be interesting. I'm excited for the game. And I'd like to see some guys like LaShawn Williams, like Gavin Williams. I know you want to get Kelly Martin his reps, but let's get some of these young guys an opportunity to see what they can do before we head into spring practice.
So Corey is on the record for picking Iowa to win this game against Kentucky. I am not on the record. I have yet to make my selection. I'm going to tell you that it's going to take a little bit of thought out of me to separate these two teams, because I do think that there is much to try to make out of past performance. And I got to say that I'm slightly inclined to pick Kentucky. I just think that they're a little bit more balanced of a team with not the obvious offensive woes that are plaguing the Hawkeyes.
Well, they have the pieces too, and I'm not saying it's going to be a Purdue. They don't play like Purdue, but if there's one mismatch on the field, it's Wan'Dale Robinson against whoever he matches up against. Okay, and I like Riley Moss, but he is not the best defensive back in the Big Ten. Okay, a lot of these awards go, they're not political per se, but there's politics involved, right? And I don't even think he's the best defensive back on this team. And this is going to maybe anger some Iowa fans too, or big Riley Moss fans, but I think he's maybe the third best defensive back on this team. And that might be giving him more credit, because I think Terry Roberts might be better. Matt Hankins, I think, is better. And Dane Belton is better. With that being said, this is a very good defensive backfield. I've been saying this since August. And it's performed well. Riley Moss has performed well, but Riley has succumbed at times to go routes. We saw him get beat in a couple double cuts against Kent State early in the year. So he's had his moments against Kentucky schools. Let's hope it's not this Saturday against a Kentucky school. But Wan'Dale Robinson has the ability to beat anybody deep. Will Levis also has the ability to be a bit erratic. He can be turnover prone at times. Iowa's actually one of the worst teams in the Big Ten forcing fumbles. There is a misconception that Iowa is just incredible at forcing turnovers. They're very good at forcing interceptions, Mark. Not very good at all forcing fumbles. So that is something that at times Kentucky has been, they have one of the worst turnover margins in the country, worst in the SEC at, they only force 0.8 turnovers per game, I believe. But again, if you can't force fumbles, you better hope you can figure out a way to force an interception. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, bowl prep, a lot can change. Maybe there's some young guys that have developed. Kirk always talks about the value of having a bowl prep for some of the younger guys. And we know there's going to be opportunity because Hankins is out. Terry Roberts did not practice today. He's out as of right now. We know Tyler Goodson's out. So there are opportunities for guys to shine. I'm hearing, Mark, that the offensive line is staying basically what we've seen it. It's Richmond on the right, on the left, Plum on the right, and then probably a mix of Ince, Justin Britt, Connor Colby at the two guard spots, and of course Kyler Schott too. We don't want to forget him. And then Linderbaum is playing. And kudos to Tyler Linderbaum. If there's any guy that has any reason to sit out a bowl game, it's Tyler Linderbaum, and he didn't even think about it. So that's just who he is. Again, not dissing anybody who decides to sit out. I think it's disappointing when it happens, but I give credit to Tyler for sticking with it.
For all the advanced metrics that have crept into and been devised on the sporting landscape, you would think somebody would come up with some type of way of weighting some of the statistics that you just cited, because I think that we cite these statistics, and I do as much as anybody else. So that's not to be critical, but I would like to see maybe some more context given to them, maybe based on the recency of the compilation of those stats, and then also the quality of the opponent, so that there would be some type of, aberration that's built into it to ward against the team that throws for 100 yards a game and then puts up 500 against an FCS opponent, and those sorts of things that would give a little bit better context to these stats, especially at this point in the season.
Well, Mark, we were live with Don Patterson on this channel on Sunday night, and I know you listened for a while, and I got the gist, and I could be wrong that you disagreed with me when I was speaking out against Kentucky's schedule. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to fight me on this. Kentucky, by all the metrics I've seen, has the worst SEC schedule of all, however many teams, 14 teams in the SEC.
Mm-hmm.
They have the worst schedule of anyone. So I'm not saying it's an easy schedule, but relative to the rest of the conference, it's not that tough. They avoided Arkansas, they avoided Ole Miss, they avoided Bama, of course. LSU's down, Florida's down. They played South Carolina. They played a lot of bowl eligible teams in 6-6, maybe 7-5. But besides Georgia, they haven't really been tested.
So they play in the SEC Eastern Division. It's the weaker of the two. And so the way the scheduling format is set up in the SEC is you play everyone in your division. You play 2 teams in the other division. Their cross-division rival, which is idiotic, but I've addressed that in other platforms. It's not applicable here. Is Mississippi State. Mississippi State and Kentucky play every year. Their other game this year was against LSU. LSU not as good as they typically are. So Mississippi State a 7-5 team, Kentucky or LSU a 6-6 team. Their out of conference schedule is what it typically is. They schedule 3 complete cream puffs, and then they play Louisville, as they always do. In Louisville's, we're seeing what Louisville is. They're a top 50 or 60 team in the country.
It was on the road.
Good.
It was on the road. I'll give them credit for that.
They're a 6-6 team. So Kentucky probably did play the worst schedule in the conference. They play in the best conference, so they did play Georgia.
Whoa. The SEC is the best conference?
State.
I thought you were all in the Big Ten being the best conference. This surprises me. Well, 0-3 so far, Mark.
Okay.
I know it's not all down. It comes down to bowl games. I get that. And keep in mind, Florida, you lose to a group of 5 school, and now we have Auburn losing to a group of 5 school. And what was the other? What was the third one? Was that a group of 5 schools?
Missouri and Army.
Army's what? They're independent, right?
Yes.
So what do we call them? They're not group of 5. They're not Power 5. So, that's not a very good start. Now we'll see. I mean, if the Big Ten comes out and stinks it up, unfortunately, we're going to have Rutgers put a bad mark on the Big Ten because they're going to lose to Wake Forest. I have a hard time seeing them win.
Be a bad mark, though.
Well, it's people are going to SEC fandom. The SEC fans are going to be able to say, "Oh, that's they lost to the ACC."
It will be part of the record.
It's not a regular bowl matchup.
That's what's another, while we're piling on ESPN to a certain extent during the show, that's what's inane about this stupid bowl standings and whatever award they give out. There's no context to it whatsoever. Right. It's the stupidest thing.
Let's be honest. I mean, I thought Houston played really badly today. That's just my opinion from what I saw. I thought they played very poorly. And I told you earlier in the show, I think Auburn's very undisciplined. And yet Houston still won that game. That's an 11-2 Houston team. I know they're in the AAC, but playing a 6-6 Auburn team, is that the best matchup we could envision for a top 20 Houston team?
It was a close game, though.
It was a close game. I understand that. And like I said, I don't think Houston played very well.
So it's the second best team in the American Conference taking on the 8th best team, a 3-5 team in the SEC. So that's pretty comparable. That's what we're talking about here. When we're talking about, and these instances have not been favorable for the SEC. Florida doesn't have a coach. They're putting together a coaching staff. They're pretty much a mess.
Which sort of helps my argument about Kentucky's schedule, because Florida's going through a coaching change. LSU's going through a coaching change. So, it is what it is. I will say, Gary, I see the comment on here. Huge percentage picked Rutgers over Wake Forest. Do we know why that is?
Well, maybe against the spread they are.
No, I think he's talking straight up, and I know why this is, Mark. He's probably quoting, now, Gary, if I'm wrong, you can call me out on it. I'm guessing he's looking at ESPN, right? Which we're looking at ESPN's Bowl Mania. And who was Wake Forest's original opinion? Because he was looking at Bowl Mania.
Texas
Who was
A&M.
Wake Forest's original opponent?
Texas A&M.
Okay, so people had picked Texas A&M. So what ESPN did is they just subbed Rutgers in, and people haven't went back and changed the pick.
I would think that's
what it is. Well, I know that's what it is because I've been monitoring the same thing what Gary's looking at. So if
it's
you're
a 2 touchdown spread.
Yeah, 70% of people aren't picking Rutgers. Now maybe they win. I think it'd be great for the Big Ten.
Oh, it'd be phenomenal.
Wake Forest.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Yes.
It would be.
So to be clear, The results during the 2021 season leads me to determine the Big Ten and the SEC are inseparable. I don't think there's any way, and I would argue anyone on this point, just based on the results on the field, neither conference distinguished itself to date as being better than the other. Their out-of-conference performances were the best among the Power Five, and therefore the best among any conferences, but not was anyone dominant in any such way against the other four conferences. That said, if you add everything else into the equation, which equals an evaluation, at least in my behalf, of conferences, meaning recruiting rankings and NFL players and all that, and just my own eyeball evaluation, I have never been so confident that this conference is the best. This one's the second. This is third, fourth, and fifth. I've always been like, wow, I can't separate the ACC and the Pac-12 or the Big 12 and the ACC or whomever. But I have little doubt that the SEC is the best conference in college football, that the Big 10 is number 2, that the Big 12 is number 3, that the ACC is 4, and the Pac-12 is clearly 5.
Why are we looking at players that go into the NFL, though? I mean, I understand.
Because this has been going on forever. If this was like an aberration and this was kind of a one-time thing, but this is just a continuation of SEC dominance in producing.
Yeah,
NFL
but we're not
players.
talking about which conference produces more talent. We're talking about which conference performs better at the college level.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of like saying I'm going to rank the SEC conference ahead of the Big Ten because they have higher recruiting classes. I mean, it's slightly different,
but it plays out on the field. The results in the field back all of that and continue to year after year after year after year.
Well, 0-3.
0-3 against, yeah.
I know. I get what you're saying. I'm fine with the debate, and you could be right. I think it's my opinion. It's 1A, 1B. I'm biased though. I'm an Iowa guy.
I'm biased too, but I'm biased toward the Big Ten.
Yeah,
if anything,
sure. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, if Iowa beats Kentucky, that's a perfect example of a game that will help that narrative.
Sure, absolutely.
Even though I think Kentucky's probably the worst. By the way, touchdown Louisville with 3 minutes to go. It's a 3-point game.
Oh, nice.
Even though Kentucky is probably the worst 9-win team in all of the Power 5, and Iowa is probably the worst 10-win team in all of the Power 5. Maybe not because the ACC is garbage, but let's just be honest that those are probably, not to downplay the Citrus Bowl, but when you look at strength of schedule of Kentucky and Iowa, like 2 of the worst in the Power 5, and they're playing each other in Orlando.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, you made the statement the other day that this is the worst Citrus Bowl matchup ever.
Am I wrong, Mark? You know college. Would you disagree?
I don't disagree.
Yeah. I mean, people were comparing it to that game in 2005, the LSU Iowa game in 2005. There's no well, it's because it's the last time Iowa was there, but there's no comparison. There is just no comparison between the two games. There was so much I mean, that was such a, well, obviously it was an incredible finish for Iowa fans. One of the more memorable finishes in Iowa football history. But yeah, this game just doesn't have the luster. And I just, what I'll say too is I just hope this game happens, because let's not forget, Iowa had their game against Missouri canceled last year. Iowa's had 2 chances against SEC teams these last 2 years. And so far we're on for this game on Saturday. But if for some reason it were to get canceled, that would be terrible. It would be a disappointing way. It's such a weird way to end a season. It was so odd last year because, I remember last year Iowa plays all 8 games. Then they're scheduled to play Michigan and they cancel, which I have opinions as to why Michigan canceled, but we won't get into that. And then we go into the Mizzou game and they cancel. So I just hope that doesn't happen. I know a lot of Iowa fans are going down, as they always do, and they'll enjoy Florida weather regardless. I am not going down and considered it for a while. I have some friends in the Tampa area and family down there, but I don't know, just with all the cancellations, that just scares me to death. And of course, I always say, if you're an Iowa person, I don't know if you're an Iowa or an Iowa State fan or whatever, and you want to go south during the wintertime, Mark, you don't want it 30 to 40 degrees here when you go down. You want it 0 degrees. You want your friends and your family and those dear to you to suffer when you're gone. Okay. So it's disappointing when I decided not to go. I looked at the forecast this weekend and the high is like 9. So I was like, oh, that's nice. So if I had left, it would have been perfect. But no, just not for me, not worth it. I wish everybody safe travels down there. And I know it's a fun place. Camping World Stadium is sort of an interesting, unique place because it's not really home to anybody anymore, right, Mark?
No.
It's just a standing stadium they use for certain games. So that's kind of fun. And should be a fun game. I've complimented Mark Stoops on numerous occasions. Iowa was Will Levis's first Power 5 offer. They played him at Penn State last year. Again, they've played Wan'Dale Robinson. He set the record for receiving yards in Kentucky history for a season, correct?
I have not seen that, but it wouldn't surprise me because he caught almost 100 passes.
Yeah, it's just incredible. So and that's my I know the show last night that I did, I talked to Kyle Schlicker, former Iowa kicker, who, by the way, was the kicker in the 2003 to 2006, I want to say. So he would have kicked in the 05, I believe, the 05 Capital One Bowl. But Schlicker made the comment how he's kind of old school and he gets tired of hearing about this portal. And I just made the comment, look, if Iowa or whoever doesn't want to take advantage of it, then they're going to get left behind. Whether you like it or not, you're going to get left behind if you don't get with the times. And so a perfect example of the fact that, hey, a guy who transfers to a different school and only spends a year or two, those success stories are everywhere. Will Levis is a perfect example of that. And I know he's still got another year or two if he wants it at Kentucky, but Wan'Dale Robinson, he set all kinds of records at Nebraska. What does he do? He transfers and sets records at Kentucky. So it can be done. Iowa's had success stories. Jack Heflin, Mekhi Sargent was a transfer. Van Valkenburg, Charlie Jones is a transfer. So it can be done, and Kentucky's a good example of that.
Let's get to the super chat on the screen. Courtesy Dave. We appreciate your contribution, Dave. I wish these kids who opt out do it before the bowl is announced. This way the coach can work on the next guy up. Go Gophers. Of course, Minnesota playing West Virginia tonight, and the rest of the Big Ten and bowl games, including Iowa.
And Minnesota Dave, he's got one of the best calls on any of our post-game shows all year when he tuned in after Minnesota beat Wisconsin and sang the fight song to Don and I. Maybe the call of the year because I was singing right along with him. So thank you, Minnesota Dave, for the
Very
generosity.
Nice. Minnesota Dave. Very good. And I will take apart all the numbers and results following the entire season to break down objectively the conference rankings, aside from my own bias or take on it.
So how much does how much do you, if the SEC goes, 2-8 in bowl season or whatever they would go, I don't know how many bowl entries they have, but how much would that change your perception for the season?
You're not talking about me breaking down the metrics because it would affect that considerably. But my own perception,
without even looking at context,
it would change my perception of how good the league was this particular season. I don't really think much has changed overall.
Well, we'll see. And again, Houston's a perfect example. I know UCF beat Florida, but Houston was struggling to beat a pretty average Auburn team today. And I know a lot of Big 12 fans are banking on Houston kind of carrying the torch a bit. And obviously Cincinnati, I understand that. BYU, they played terrible in their bowl game, in my opinion. I thought they played awful. So I'm interested to see. I know we've talked about the arms race with conferences. If the Big 12 can, given the fact that they've added their 4, can those 4 even slightly replace what they're losing? And that's going to be an interesting storyline moving forward. And so far in bowl season, I'm not real impressed. I know, again, BYU, Cincinnati, UC, all these teams, every single one of those teams had a good record. What was UCF's final record? 7-5?
9-4.
Oh,
with a
9 and
bowl
4,
win.
8 and 4. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all those teams were successful in every single one of them. It was there's a reason why the Big 12 caught them when they were high.
Yeah, I posted a video looking at the last 5 years from those 4 schools and how they've competed against the Power 5. And it's not embarrassing by any stretch. They've been competitive. Now, not competitive to the point that I think in any way that they're replacing Texas and Oklahoma. They're not replacing those two. But the Big 12 at least attacked it from a quality of quantity, not just grabbing whatever schools are going to come along. But
they did the best they could.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the best they could do. I mean, the Notre Dame was never going to the Big 12. That was just never going to happen. And even if you were to get Missouri to come back out of the SEC, that doesn't move the needle at all, unfortunately. So, anyways, yeah, no, I agree with you. And conference, I mean, the conference talk, I agree with you. It's been much more punctuated. I think it's been much more clear. The ACC, and I know I don't want to use ultimatums. The ACC is not good. Pac-12 is. Can we agree that Pac-12 is not good? Can we agree that
Pac-12 is the worst conference?
Utah might be the worst Rose Bowl opponent since I don't know how long. TCU. When did TCU? Didn't they? Who'd they play?
2010. They beat Wisconsin.
They beat Wisconsin, so you can't say. I don't know. I mean, Utah is a good team and probably the best team in the conference, but that's what you're supposed to have in the Rose Bowl. So, yeah, and so it's kind of an odd year. And the SEC was down. Let's be honest. The SEC with like I said, Florida and LSU in kind of rebuild, and we kind of perceived Alabama for a while being down, right? Didn't we kind of all think that they were not really there? I mean, they nearly missed out on the playoff if they lose that game to Auburn.
I'll put it like this. I think the SEC is more balanced than it typically is. And I think that gets misconstrued as being down. They've mashed together a bunch of 7-5 and 6-6 teams.
So D-Roop 75 says this dude actually thinks the Pac-12 is better than the ACC. Did one of us say that?
No,
I never said that. I think they're both pretty bad, to be completely honest. I think the Big 12 was actually pretty darn good.
Yeah, I do think that they're both bad, but I think that the ACC is clearly better than the Pac-12. And I do that from crunching the numbers that the Pac-12, this is how bad the Pac-12 was this year. If you look at the out-of-conference performance of the other 4 conferences, because of FCS and Group of 5 games, they're all winning well over 80% of the games out of conference. The Pac-12 was 16-16 out of conference, and that's including FCS and Group of 5 games.
Yeah,
they lost
bad.
Like 7 of those games.
There's always the outliers, right? I mean, the Oregon win over Ohio State is still one of those head-scratching.
It's to their credit, but it's one game.
Yeah. No, you're right. And let's be honest, with the movement that we have now, and I know we've talked about it, but with Oklahoma and Texas going to the SEC, it's only going to make those divides bigger.
What's funny is you bring up BYU and it being disappointing that they lost a bowl game. BYU was 5-0 against the Pac-12. And 4 of those games were all against upper division teams in the Pac-12.
Who were those teams?
They beat Utah. They beat USC. They beat UCLA. Or I'm sorry, take that back. They beat Utah, USC, Arizona State, and Oregon State.
Yeah, and Oregon State. Didn't they lose?
Washington
they lost to
State,
Utah State.
Washington State.
But Oregon State's another example of someone who I kind of banked on, and then they go out and lose to Utah. I mean, they really don't have anybody carrying the torch right now. And I know Bo Nix, maybe Bo Nix going to Oregon will kind of bump them. But obviously they're going through a coaching change as well.
Corey, you should address this question for sure from Erica.
I want to drive the 4 hours to Iowa City, find Brian Ferentz, shake him, and yell, "You can't handle the truth. Let the Hawkeyes offense join the 21st century. Laugh out loud." Well, I don't think he's going to be in Iowa City right now. So I'm assuming she's talking about the off season. It's a combination. I think we understand that. It's a combination because there's no debating the fact that Iowa's offense has never been consistently good under Kirk Ferentz. And that's whether Brian has been the OC, Ken O'Keefe's been the OC, Greg Davis was the OC. I think we all understand Greg Davis was a stepping stone to Brian. But I think you have to put some of it on Kirk. And even if it is Brian who's failed, because the offense is a failure this year. As far as just results, Mark, can we really debate that? Like, I still think there's some Iowa fans that think it's almost sacrilege to say, that Iowa's offense is bad, but that's just what it is. Let me give you real quick, and I shared this on the other show I did last night, but I'm going to run through some of these stats for you. All right. This is offensive totals ranked by, in relation to the FBS as a whole, 130 teams in the FBS. Scoring offense for Iowa, 96th. Total offense, 123rd. Rushing offense, 111th. Passing offense, 111th. Passing efficiency, 117th. Third down success, 109th. Fourth down success, 121st. Red zone success, 121st. First downs, 110th. Sacks allowed, 87th. That's just terrible, right, Mark? It's just terrible. Can we just say it? I mean,
it's terrible.
It's terrible.
And I even de-emphasize the total yardage figures, but they are an indicator.
Yeah. But,
and when you go to those efficiency rankings, that even underlines it for me even more.
Right. Well, I had somebody last night who said to me, well, Iowa, you got to understand that the Iowa plays different and they're not going to have a lot of yards ever. No. All these other metrics bear it out. So let's just be clear on this. The offense is bad. And so I have no problem with Erica's comment, but I think you got to put some of it on Kirk, even if it's Brian who's stinking it up. And I wouldn't put it all on Brian, but even if it was Brian, Kirk is his. I know that technically Gary Barta has to oversee him. He's his supervisor because Kirk is his dad, but Kirk is still in charge of that football program, and he's got to be able to make the change. So
points per game total is including defensive scores.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So, what's weird about it is last year the offense was actually decent. And by the way, Air Force just pulled it out, so my life is over. But the offense was actually decent last year because they ran the ball well, 4.6 yards a carry or something like that for the season, which was really good. Maybe that's a little high. It was over 4 yards a carry. And so that made me feel like this year I didn't have the concerns. I certainly didn't have the magnitude of concerns with the offense that I have now. And I did predict, Mark, you remember my prediction preseason. I said Iowa will win the West. They won the West. But I don't, after the fact now, obviously you lose in the Big Ten title game the way they lost. It doesn't make you feel a lot better. But I certainly don't feel like I thought I would feel after a West title. And that's because of the fact that this offense has some serious issues. And you look ahead to next year, we said it before, we'll have months to say it before the start of 2022 season. The season is tough and you're not going to win 10 games with this offense. So maybe bowl prep can, again, maybe it can be a huge jump for this team. And if they don't go after a quarterback in the portal, maybe somebody will emerge. It's not because nobody's emerged. Anybody who wants to act like somebody's emerged, that has not happened. Maybe it'll be Petrus. Maybe Carson May will come in here in the summer, be great in summer conditioning, and just tear it up in fall camp and be the starter. I mean, I would give that about a 0.000001% chance of happening, Mark, but maybe it will. Maybe I'll be proven wrong.
What were Iowa's capable offensive performances this season?
Maryland.
And however I was just going to say, Maryland, they threw for about 280 and ran it pretty well. Obviously, they were the beneficiary of a ton of turnovers, but they did run and throw it proficiently in that game.
7 turnovers, though. I mean, 7 turnovers.
But even in a reasonably played game by Maryland, Iowa would have scored 30-some points probably.
I think so. Yeah, that's probably fair. But, and I understand Ohio State's Ohio State. Maryland got blasted by several teams this year. So, and Indiana's terrible, and Iowa struggled offensively against Indiana, Mark. Now, Indiana, I think their struggles were, if I had to look back, their struggles were primarily offensive, right? I mean, especially once Penix went down. But
Sure.
Besides that game, immediately Colorado State was a struggle. Kent State was a struggle offensively. Besides that Maryland game, there wasn't really a game that Iowa thoroughly dominated there was not a game that they dominated off. And I wouldn't say they dominated offensively against Maryland. They were good and were, again, beneficiaries of a lot of turnovers in that game. And to do it on the road at night is impressive. But man, if we're banking on our best performance being against a 6-6 Maryland team, we have some problems.
Gary is wanting to know where your Iowa Hoops content is.
Well, it's not here. Yeah, we're fully underway, Gary. We do our post-game show with Gary Close after every Iowa basketball game. So tomorrow night we'll be over at my channel From the Hawkeye of the Storm live, taking calls, taking chats, and Big Ten season starts back up. So you're 0-2 in the Big Ten because Iowa lost two really good Big Ten teams in Purdue and Illinois. We'll start up, I think, Monday. We start back up. So we'll have a post-game show tomorrow night after the Western Illinois game, and then we'll start back up on Monday for Big Ten season after the Maryland game. And I will say this, quick, as I said, Western Illinois, this made me think, of course, Don Patterson, the Western Illinois legend, winningest coach in Leatherneck history. But it's interesting for Hawkeye fans. Anybody know where Taquan Roberson transferred to? I kind of just gave it away, but he just committed to Western Illinois, or excuse me, not Western Illinois. Got that in my head. Connecticut, which was, of course, okay, Coach Don Patterson's last job. So he'll be that program is in a tailspin, but
it's in a tailspin. Jim Mora, yes, yeah, coached by a capable NFL and UCLA head coach.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see what Taquan can do there. And I don't know who's behind Penn State. Do you know? Because of course they don't have Levis and they don't have Roberson anymore. I don't know who the next quarterback would be.
Oh, what is his name? It's easily mispronounced. It's something like Volume, something in there. He played they pulled Clifford the last game or the second to last game of the season. So Penn State played Michigan State the last game of the season. The one before that, Rutgers, they played the backup quarterback. I can't think of his name, but he looked pretty good.
So why wasn't Roberson?
They did not play Roberson. They played
interesting. Okay.
The other quarterback, and they're also bringing in one of the top quarterbacks in the country, Drew Aller from Ohio, as a top 2 or 3 quarterback in the country. Now, whether he's going to start as of course, Clifford's coming back, but
right.
Yeah, so there you have it. So,
yep, and go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to set up the lineup. Iowa basketball postgame with you tonight.
Yep, tomorrow night. Tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night.
So the game's at 7 p.m. Central Time, Iowa, Western Illinois. It'll be on BTN Plus. So if you haven't subscribed, Mark, be sure to get BTN Plus before tomorrow night. And I'm sure that between bowl games and Iowa, Western Illinois, I know you'll be picking the Hawkeye, right? The Hawkeye game, right? But 7 p.m. post game at around 9:00 p.m. Central Time, and then we'll of course do our post game show Saturday after the Kentucky game, which starts at noon Central Time, 1 Eastern, and so we'll be done about 3:30 Central, 4:30 Eastern or so.
Christian Valou, 15 of 24 for 235, 3 touchdowns, no picks against Rutgers.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see if he'll be able to because who does Penn State play? I lose track.
Arkansas,
yeah, okay.
Their SEC matchup.
Should be a fun matchup, right?
I think that's going to be a good game.
And you better hope Clifford stays healthy.
I named that as the game I would want to see outside the playoffs, my number 1 choice.
It's not Kentucky, Iowa?
It's a close second.
Yes. And by the way, for you MediaCom customers, you will not be able to watch the Iowa game, right? because it's been over a year now, and Mediacom still can't come to an agreement with Tegna, who owns the local ABC channel. So better get an antenna or switch providers or do something, because isn't that ridiculous, Mark? Can't watch a local TV station that happens to have the Citrus Bowl on it. One of the few ABC games in all bowl seasons. So thankfully I don't have Mediacom, and we'll enjoy the game.
All right. So again, Corey's got the post game for you on Iowa basketball tomorrow night on From the Hawkeye of the Storm. And then right here on the Iowa channel, post game of the Hawkeyes in Kentucky in the Citrus Bowl, New Year's Day following the game.
Sounds good, folks. Mark.
We appreciate you being here.
Yeah, absolutely. And continue to enjoy bowl games. Again, it's unfortunate the Holiday Bowl got canceled, but I know several more games tonight. Go Gophers for Minnesota Dave. Absolutely. Go Gophers. And I know you've got a West Virginia channel, so you probably can't comment, but I'll say go Gophers and go Big Ten and help that perception.
I will say go Nebraska GBR, because we've got our Nebraska show coming up in about 15 or 20 minutes. So if you'd like to join us for more college football talk, I don't know what we're going to be talking about.
Well, last I heard, Casey Thompson was another quarterback on their radar. They're getting every day I hear of a new quarterback that they're after. So they're not afraid of having that out in the public eye. Because I've heard, again, Casey Thompson was obviously Keaton Slovis. Now he's committed to Pitt, but he was on their radar. Casey Thompson's on their radar. They reached out, I believe, to Bo Nix. They've been really aggressive, and their new quarterbacks coach is who, or offensive coordinator is who?
Oh boy,
bigger guy, right? Name. Bigger, older guy.
Yeah, I can't come up with him.
But he's been very outspoken about how aggressive they were going to be, and they have done that so far. We'll see if they land somebody.
So Iowa fans, not to put a downer on your possibilities for 2022, but if Nebraska brings in a talented quarterback and they end up being as good as or better than Iowa next year, just blame the powers that be.
Well, yeah, blame yourself. Blame Iowa. Don't blame, because you've got to, again, it's an arms race, whether we're talking about conferences, teams, whatever. You can only control what you can control. You can't control what other teams do. So you give credit where credit is due, but you have to look at yourselves in the mirror and say, how can we improve? And I think there are ways for Iowa to do that. But again, right now they're working on bowl prep, and that's, a lot of progress can be made during bowl prep. So there are positives there.
All right, Corey, enjoy the game and the entirety of bowl season, and hopefully we are done with cancellations, but of course we shall see.
Have a bad feeling we're not, but enjoy what we can, and let's watch some football.